Welcoming MS Jodha and Reema Huja. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here for a fascinating session. We are about to launch the book, The Story of the Jodhpur Lancers by Brigadier MS Jodha. May I now invite Trisha De Niyogi of Niyogi Books, the author, Brigadier MS Jodha, and our chief guest for this session, Dr. Reema Huja, to take their places on the dais. May I now invite Trisha De Niyogi to give the welcome address.
Very good evening. I guess it's raining outside and hence a very warm welcome inside Baitak today. Today we are here to launch and discuss about our latest book, Jodhpur Lancers, and I would like to welcome you all here for coming here and listening and showing interest in this book. I would also like to welcome famous historian Reema Huja and for kindly accepting to launch the book here today. I would also like to welcome the author, Brigadier MS Jodha, for coming here today and also giving us the opportunity to publish this book. I'm going to briefly talk about two things, why this session and this book is important and relevant. It's because this book, which we are going to launch today, documents a very important part of Indian military history. I'm not going to go too much into detail because I'm sure the storyteller MS Jodha will really talk about it in a while. But also the second thing which is very important about this book, that it contains rare photographs, around 500 of them, and which Mr. Jodha has very painstakingly collected from various sources and are not available on public domain. Most of them are not available on public domain. With this, I would like to welcome you all once again, and let's begin.
Thank you, Trisha. May I now request Dr. Huja and Brigadier Jodha to unveil the book. This will be followed by a photo opportunity. Ma'am, right where you are, so the audience has a clear view. And Trisha, could you please join them to unveil the book as well? Thank you, our distinguished guests. May I now request Dr. Reema Huja to say a few words.
Before I thank all of you for being here, I have to thank Brigadier Jodha for giving me this honor to launch a book which is so significant for our history and which celebrates the sacrifices made by the armed forces. In fact, you know, in Rajasthan, rain is always a good symbol because it means you're going to have plenty. And this year, we haven't had our winter rain, our Mavat. So I think that is very appropriate that it rains. But I also want to make another connection, and that is when people of the Jodhpur Lancers, the Sardar, but you will talk about it, went to France to fight in the First World War. These people from the deserts of Rajasthan, where of course it gets cold, but it doesn't rain so much. And they were in the trenches of France, cold, wet. I think it's a good homage that it is raining. I think it's a good thing for us to celebrate. I will take less time because I want to hear more from Brigadier Jodha on this. But it is remarkable that he has put together a book which is covering the history of the Jodhpur Lancers from the time they were raised, and the campaigns they went to, Tira, Muhammad Pass, Africa, China, of course, the First World War, Haifa. Now, as a child, I remember there was a day, we all went from school, and there was tent pegging, and there was a lot of horse riding, and it was incredible. And I went home, and I told my parents about it. And they said, you have seen something which celebrates the epitome of valor and bravery, of a charge of mounted men with lances in their hands against machine guns. But after that, yes, we have Haifa Day. We haven't really talked about Haifa. And that is one of the things which comes out in Brigadier Jodha's book. The sacrifices made, the glory won, the medals won, the ones who never came home, jo laut ke ghar nahi aaye. That is all there in the story, not just of Haifa, but in the First World War. And then the story doesn't end there, sir. The story goes on for the interwar years, and then the Second World War. And even now that the Jodhpur Lancers no longer exist as a separate force, they have been merged into the Indian Army, and the story of their bravery and glory and sacrifices lives on. The other remarkable thing I found about the book, well, there are several remarkable things. There are photographs. There are photographs of medals. There are letters from people. I think you will tell us how you got them from the various members of the families that had someone serving abroad. Along with it, there is a history of Marwar, the state, Jodhpur, which comes through in a very, very readable manner. So it makes, it pins these heroes to where they came from. And of course, it also has the story of the remarkable Sir P. Pratap Singh Ji, he was a Maharajah in his own right. He became the Maharajah of Idar. But he was also regent of the state of Jodhpur as a younger son, and then later the brother, and then the uncle of ruling monarchs. He became the regent not once, more than once. And eventually, he more or less died in harness. And I think he was probably among the eldest of the soldiers to actually go and fight. He was 75 or something when he went out to the First World War. So there's a lot to read about him, and you find it in the book. I've already taken more than my fair share of time, because I want to hear from Brigadier Jodha how he put the book together, his homage to his grandfather, who led the charge after Major Dalpat Singh fell in battle and won laurels, and then continued to serve for a long time. But through that labor of love, you have brought together a beautiful picture, immortal picture of the Jodhpur Lancers. While I still have the mic, it is my humble request to him to consider, he's just finished this, I think he wants to take some time off, but I think he owes it to us to give us another book about the state forces of India. That would be remarkable. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am, for this beautiful introduction. Time is short to put across as to first, why did I write? This was a cavalry regiment of the Maharajah of Jodhpur, in which my grandfather served for 40 years. So when I was a small child, in our house, I saw a photograph, which still I have. At the back of the photo was written, 25 Rue d'Amsterdam, Paris. And in uniform, his photograph is there. So I must have been in class 5 or 6. I wondered, why did he go to Paris? Because I haven't even heard its name. Why did he go those 70 years back to Paris? And that's where my first inquisitiveness about came. Slowly I started gathering. The aim was to collect as many as the photographs and all. So this is about an Imperial Service Cavalry Regiment which was raised, it was a scheme raised in 1885. This was a regiment consisting of 600 soldiers. They first went on northwest frontier in 1893 on the Black Mountain. Then they went to Tira campaign in 1897-98, and then for one whole year, from July 1900 to August 1901, they were part of the expeditionary force during the Boxer Rebellion at China. And all these campaigns, my grandfather had joined this regiment in 1889 and he retired in 1929. So he took part in these three campaigns. And then on 5th August 1914, when the Great War broke out, that time the Maharajah Regent of Jodhpur was legendary Sir Pratap Singh. He was an extremely famous amongst all the princes in India. He was an extremely good administrator, a sportsman, and a soldier. These were three of his qualities. So he was at that time in August 1914, when the war broke out, he was 69-year-old. He volunteered, he wrote to Viceroy Hardinge to Simla that I would like to accompany my cavalry regiment, because this cavalry regiment was made by Sir Pratap. He was passionate about horses, and he said, I will accompany my regiment. And he remained with this regiment from August 1914 till 1919 for 5 years. He went at 69 years, and when he came back at 74 years. Of course, he died in 1922. And of course, he was the Maharaja Regent, and his grandnephew, Maharaja Sumer Singh, he was just 16-year-old. So these two gentlemen accompanied this regiment, and perhaps Jodhpur Lancers, these two gentlemen, what I mean to say is Jodhpur would have provided the youngest soldier in form of Maharaja Sumer Singh, who was 16-year-old, and their Sir Pratap at 69-year-old. So this regiment went to France through Bombay. They left in 3 special trains. They went to France. They remained for 3.5 years there in France. It was basically a trench warfare. Cavalry didn't get the longed-for cavalry charge. Sir Pratap kept asking the British General Overall Forces Commander, General Haig, and General Joffre of the French, please, I want to make a cavalry charge. But there was no breakthrough. Cavalry could not get any chance to make any kind of a cavalry charge. And finally, in February 1918, the whole of the Indian Cavalry Corps was transferred to the region of Palestine and Egypt. And this is the region with open desert kind of a terrain, more familiar to Jodhpur, and they were extremely at home. And there they made 3 classical cavalry charges in which we still remember the Jodhpur Lancers because of those 3 cavalry actions that they did. First was on 14 July 1918 in Jordan Valley, then on 23rd September 1918 at Haifa, and on 26th October 1918 at Aleppo, which is now in Syria. You know, there is a very interesting story, though one has been hearing about this charge of Haifa. It was localized kind of in Jodhpur. Why did it last about, I will say, 8, 9, 10 years, and especially so last 3, 4 years? It came about, and now everyone knows about it, and I'm so happy that now everyone talks about the cavalry charge at Haifa. There is one very interesting story as to how did the Israelis learn about it. They didn't know it till 2008, 2009. Just to finish the story, there was an Israeli doctor, Dr. Kronjon, in 1992-93. He came for a conference, neurologist conference, was flying to Bombay. There were riots in Bombay. His aircraft was diverted to Jodhpur, and he happened to stay in the famous Umaid Bhawan Palace, which has a restaurant by the theme of the Jodhpur Lancers. The restaurant name is Risala. There he saw a small statue of Major Dalpat Singh, who was the officiating commanding officer of the Jodhpur Lancers at Haifa, who was killed in action there, and the Britishers had given him the title Hero of Haifa. And this gentleman asked the stewards there, who is this Hero of Haifa? I have never heard about him. I belong to Haifa. So anyway, he went back. He didn't get any satisfactory answer, and he wrote a small article in the Hebrew language there, and it was a forgotten story. Then in 2008-9, there was a Haifa History Society that was formed. They picked up from that small cutting. And I'm so lucky that Ambassador Navtesh Sarna, sir was the ambassador there in Israel. How lucky that he's sitting here. He was the ambassador. And that Haifa History Society, at home to the ambassador's residence, they narrated the incident to the ambassador. And we were lucky that he was a historian. Till then, they have been telling in the past, but it was not picked up. He immediately wrote to the MEA, who wrote to the army headquarters. Then it was learned that 61st Cavalry is there. They knew I am researching on it, and my grandfather was there. And then I was contacted. I provided the entire story. And in first time, while ambassador was there, Indian Army delegation went in 2010. And I was part of that delegation. And since then, the Haifa Day is commemorated in Israel every year. The mayor and the ambassador announced that each year we will now commemorate Haifa Day, which was on 23rd September 1918. They have now included that story in their Israeli textbooks. They've released a special stamp about it. And about 3 months back was the centenary of that great battle. Again, I went as part of the official delegation there. So this is how it came about. You know, just to talk about what happened, it was such a legendary cavalry charge. Just to talk briefly about the Battle of Haifa, because that was the high point of the Jodhpur Lancers. Prior to that, as I was saying, they were involved in a cavalry charge at Jordan Valley on 14 July 1918. There is a very interesting incident that happened on 14 July 1918. That day, Jodhpur Lancers, my grandfather was the squadron commander of the Jodhpur Lancers throughout in France. So his squadron, while in action at Jordan Valley, was passing through, and there was another troop of the Pune Horse who was also operating that day in Jordan Valley. There was a Dafedar Pirdan Singh who belonged just about 7, 8, 10 kilometers from our village. And obviously my grandfather knew Dafedar Pirdan Singh. Pirdan Singh was critically injured and about to die. He dismounted from the horse, picked him up, gave him water, and he says, you know, I will have one regret in life. What will happen to my only daughter? And perhaps my grandfather gave him a word that don't worry, I'll look after her. After the war, he went on to marry my father's elder brother, that is his elder son, to that girl. So you see, such were the times and the people and their value system. So he married his elder son, Captain Madhav Singh, to that daughter of Dafedar Pirdan Singh. And that girl died in 2006 at a grand old age of 103 years. So then we come to the cavalry charge at Haifa. That day, Brigadier Harbord was the brigade commander, Field Marshal LNB was the overall forces commander. The task given to this Imperial Service Cavalry Brigade, which consisted of Jodhpur, Mysore and Hyderabad, was to capture this strategic port of Haifa so that our supplies land as soon as possible. And Turks had been defending this because they were on a height. They had machine guns. They had 10 machine guns covering the entrance to the town. They had about 11 73 millimeter field guns also covering the approach. Actually, there was only one approach to enter the town. On one side was Mount Carmel, which rises to a height of about 1,000 feet. On another side was a river Kishon. And the only approach was through that single road rail. And the Turks knew it that Jodhpur is going to come through this. They tried to cross the river to avoid that defile. Defile is that narrow passage through which the troops had to pass through it. Anyway, they had to make that cavalry attack. Brigadier Harbord decided to send a squadron on the left and right of the Mysore Lancers so that they divert the attention of those field guns. And the orders to the Jodhpur was that at 2 o'clock, these two squadrons of Mysore, which were sent ahead at 10 a.m. in the morning, with the intent that you try and interfere with these field guns so that when Jodhpur attack at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they don't fire on these charging horsemen. Jodhpur tried to cross the river. Their aim was to not go frontally through the defile as there would be very heavy casualties. They couldn't cross the river, there was no other option left, and they tried and attacked frontally. There was intense fire of the small arms, machine guns and everything. At this point in time, Major Dalpat Singh got hit on the spine and he fell there. That night he was carried into the town. He died on the operating table. My grandfather was then the senior-most squadron commander. He took over the command. The Turks couldn't have thought in their dreams that these Indian horsemen would come charging on them at 2 o'clock in the afternoon through this defile. Within moments, they had mounted on them. When the Turks realized that they crossed the defile, they started to run. And the Jodhpur, the leading squadron, there were very few casualties considering the amount of the fire that was coming onto them. They just lost 8 men, including Major Dalpat Singh. They had about 34 people who were injured. But however, in terms of the horses, the casualty is very high. There were 60 horses killed and about 83 horses were wounded. So almost about 150 men or horses got the bullet injuries. That shows the amount of the intense fire that must be coming. But there's no time to describe the battle. Enough to say that this was one of the most famous cavalry charges of the First World War. It is also considered the last of the great cavalry attack because it was a successful cavalry attack. And it became so famous that it was decided to have a permanent memorial to commemorate that famous battle victory. And Sir Pratap, who was the leading figure that time, and Brigadier Harbord, they took the initiative and a thing was sent to all the 3 Maharajas. And Krishna Raja Vodiyar of Mysore and Sir Pratap of Jodhpur and Nizam of Hyderabad contributed 3,000 pounds each, 9,000 pounds in 1920, as the Adjutant General Branch was trying to make one memorial in each of the theatre where the Indian troops had fought. The Central War Memorial came up, which is now India Gate, and they decided to have one memorial in Egypt, Mesopotamia, East Africa, France, Belgium, and all those theaters where the Indian Expeditionary Forces took part. The Indian Army wanted to build their memorial at Port Tewfik, and the Imperial Service Cavalry Brigade, that is Jodhpur, Mysore, Hyderabad, who has been operating in that region of the defense of the Suez Canal, were trying to make at Ismailia. That got the plot, but the Indian Army requested the Imperial Service Cavalry Brigade, could you please exchange and can we come at Port Tewfik? Mutually, this was agreed to. And when this 9,000 pounds was collected, Leonard Jennings was the famous British sculptor. He was commissioned to make it. It was such a beautiful bronze structures ready. They were shipped. They were about to be shipped for installation there, but it was learned that the Suez Canal Company, which was a private company, refused to give that plot of land. And then the Imperial Service Cavalry Brigade approached the Viceroy. Viceroy Reading was the Viceroy, and he said, we don't have the place at the Suez Canal now. Can a memorial be built at New Delhi? New Delhi was under construction. It was being under plan. Even the Viceroy's house had not come up in 1921. And it was decided, the Viceroy directed that let Lieutenants give the location. So there, in front of the Commander-in-Chief's house, Lieutenants recommended that this memorial may come up. And on 6th March 1924, Viceroy Reading, with representations from all these 3 states, 4 officers and 12 savars were there. Wreath laying was done, including my grandfather was present, who got a gallantry award of Indian Order of Merit. And such a beautiful memorial, which we pass through every day, though many people may not know it. These are the 3 unknown soldiers of the Jodhpur, Mysore, and Hyderabad. If you go near, you will see their uniform. They are all distinct. Their cap badges, their belt buckles, and all, they are different. So, yeah. So then after this, the Jodhpur Lancers got mechanized and merged. Today they are part of the 61st Cavalry, and it's such a good thing that 61st Cavalry got that battle honor Haifa of the Jodhpur Lancers, and each year on 23rd September, Haifa Day is commemorated. Thank you very much for this.